It began in Tanzania, and it began with 12 high school students. And the reason I began it is because as I was travelling around the world, I kept meeting young people who seemed not to have much hope, depressed, angry, apathetic. And I began talking to them, and I'm talking about high school, university, young people out in their first job. And basically they were saying, well, you know, the world's a mess, you've compromised our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. And we have. I mean, I see children every day and think how we've harmed the planet since I was that age. And I feel really ashamed of my species.
Yeah.
But I still think we have a window of time to start changing things around. And
so we approached the group and they're feeding in the late afternoon. And I'd explained that when we get close, we kneel down so that we're not towering over them. And that would reassure them. And then I would vocalise to tell them that we were coming. So I'd be saying, as we approach. And that if you're in the way, just step out of the way if a gorilla comes along. And we're looking at a gorilla feeding up a tree, and there, and a black-backed tiger, I should think, a black-backed called tiger, came up behind and just kind of elbowed his way past the film crew. Excuse me. And, oh, wow, it's unlike any wildlife filming situation that you can think of.
Yeah.
It's not sitting in a hide for weeks on end hoping to get a glimpse of something. It's being invited on a family picnic.
There are two key change makers here. You and I and everyone who cares about the earth, we are the ones who can be change makers. That's the first category. So anyone who is already in the business of being an earth protector, they've committed themselves to recognizing that actually their mission in life is to help protect this earth, because ultimately this is about protecting the lives of human and non-human, the life of the earth itself, which is why we called it Mission Life Force. But this is about how we participate in this world, and it really does not matter whether or not you're a single mum scraping a living together. You can still do a lot to help bring this forward, and indeed signing up to be an earth protector in law with the Mission Life Force campaign, you are helping and enabling, because you care, you can enable those small island developing states, their heads of states, their ministers, their delegates, and the lawyers that we can bring forward to then go into the International Criminal Court and get this law put in place.
A lot is people are saying, well, we know what you're against, what are you for? We feel that ecocide law is the thing that we can be for.
Right.
Because it actually has that potential
to unlock everything.
Exactly. It's like it's an unlocker, almost a passcode. Or I mean, Polly used to describe it as a trim tab, which is an expression that Buckminster Fuller used. And he actually said, call me the trim tab. A trim tab is apparently this mechanism on a big ship that you move, which then turns the rudder, which then turns the ship. Right. And from our perspective, that's what ecocide law is.
Mum and Dad went up and called her name, and she was at the back of the enclosure, the rather awful Sir Hugh Casson designed elephant house at London Zoo. She came rushing down, and there is this amazing photograph of my dad sort of stretching his hand across the moat, and she's stretching her trunk, and there is a sort of South Bank show moment where that electricity happens. So then we campaigned for the zoo to give us a now semi-adult elephant, 14 years old, and they said no. We had somewhere in Africa that would take her, but they said no, that she would be poached. The fact she'd broken both her tusks and had one little tiny stump sort of undermined their argument, I feel. But nevertheless, what they did agree to do is
they use the canopy to move between, they break off branches, they build their nest in the canopy every night. That opens up the canopy, so it's allowing the light in to increase the growth of the undergrowth. So they're sort of the top of the ecological system. So they're the keystone to whatever else goes on beneath them. So you've got the orangutans, and then you have the other species. You have all the other frugivorous species, like you've got hornbills, and you've got gibbons, and all the others that were fruit eating. And then you go down, and you get to obviously the litter and the insects and everything. But the keystone at the top, you lose the orangutan, and you would lose everything beneath it.
Quite on what that was. It was like they were
incredibly different. And it was really hard for me to articulate because I didn't want to romanticize, but there was something that was really very, very unique about that group. And so when I decided later to come back and make a film about our connection to nature and a different way of existing in society, they were clearly the group that shone out to me as the starting place for this journey.
One of the really important and like fascinating parts about bonobos and their behaviour is that they show us that aggression is not the only way, and they're actually a very sort of fairly peaceful ape. They show reduced aggression. They show higher levels of female dominance. They show more egalitarian social relationships between males and females. And they show high levels of social tolerance. And so those behaviours show us that we very much have the potential to increase our levels of tolerance and sort of affiliation and reduce our aggression as a species. And that's part of our evolutionary past. And so I think they're really an important reminder that
we need to work out how we control emissions of plastics and the use of plastics and what people can or can't do with them. Because actually, it's not just the beach and the ocean which have brought this to life. It's every single part of our lives. You go into the street, you go onto your country field, they're all inundated with plastics. And the furthest flung parts of the world are suffocating in plastic, and that's not good enough. It's a moral outrage. There's people who will never have even consumed anything from in plastic, who will have tides bringing in our fast food waste onto their beaches, affecting their livelihoods, affecting their fish stocks, affecting their natural resources that they need to conserve for the future. And so that is not fair. That's as unfair as climate change from emissions in the Western world affecting,
Be outraged and then turn your outrage into energy and turn that energy into action. You as a consumer have massive combined power. People can really make a difference through what they buy and why they buy it. If it isn't ethically sourced, if it is produced in a sweatshop somewhere, if it is superfluous to your need, if it's produced by an intensive farming practice that has got, welfare is an issue, is a problem, you can say no to that. You can say no to that. You can, I'm particularly interested, I'm vegetarian at the moment, and I think moving to vegan. I watched a film called Cowspiracy, and I sort of took it with a pinch of salt in as much as I said, well, even if he's got half the facts wrong, the other half are so compelling.
Have a lovely day. I'm just reminding everybody that we are flowers of the earth. We all have power to heal each other.
Lovely.
With a smile.
Well, that's a lovely message.